Hello everyone. I'm here today just to share with you something that interests me so much. It's about creating inner sacred space, or simply creating sacred space. We are, as human beings, we are social beings. We always like to interact with each other. We always want to go out and mingle with people, to be with others. That's a good trait, and it's very natural for us to do so. However, we most of the time forget that we are entitled to our own space. And by that I mean to have that space for oneself and establishing necessary boundaries. In spirituality, there is a definition which I like very much. It is said that spirituality is the path towards connection. Firstly, connection to oneself, connection to others, connection to nature, and ultimately connection to God. We are taught to connect, and that's what we're doing, and we are very good at that, to connect to others. But in this connection, sometimes we forget the boundaries that are there. And we know very well that when we cross the boundaries, we disconnect. Whenever we violate some certain spaces, we ultimately pull away ourselves from others, or others will pull away from us. Hence, it is important to understand that even though we have a need to connect, to move towards others, it is essential to remember that that space has to be respected and certain boundaries have to be acknowledged as well as respected. This space that we have around us is not just us creating it. I believe it is in nature. When we have the natural law, it's all about boundaries. When we cross the boundary of natural law, what happens then? Nature turns against us. Just like what happens when we encroach certain places, when we cut trees and we cross those boundaries, something bad happens to us. Those boundaries, sometimes which are invisible, other times visible, they have to be maintained. So those are places, those are spaces that have to be respected. And oftentimes we forget that. So it is in natural law that we have to maintain these things in order to connect deeply. It is a paradox. In order to connect deeply to nature, we have to respect the boundaries that allow nature to thrive, the space to allow nature to thrive. And even by law, even in society, we also have our laws that we have to follow. And those laws are actually boundaries, those boundaries that we should not cross. Because the moment we cross, we are entering into another sacred space, to the space of another person that belongs to another person. And when we do that, sometimes we break the law. Like we get into other people's houses, we take things that are not ours. Those are against society's law. So this space that I'm talking about is there, but we forget the boundaries. So it's important to remember that these spaces, we have a right to them. And eventually, we understand that this particular space that we have, that the boundaries that we have to set, are also divine in origin. Even the term namaste simply means that I bow to the God that is within you. So in that way, when we put our hands together, we are establishing that kind of space that I am not going to move towards you in a very bad way. You have your own space. That's why we put our hands together. We don't go and just simply grab anyone, just simply hug anybody. But we put our hands together and bow, establishing that sacred space between us, that God is inside this person. So I bow to the God within this person, and that other person will do the same way. So it is actually rooted in our spirituality that this space is sacred enough because God is present in every space. And God has established that clear boundaries too. And when we know this, life is much better. When we practice this, life is fuller and we are harmonious, or we are living in harmony with each other. So as we see around us, we have to be sensitive to the boundaries that we have around us. I call it a sacred space. And we have to know our limitations in many, many ways. The laws are there, the natural law, the society's law in the Constitution, and eventually the divine law. All these laws are very important for us to live as fuller or fully human beings. To cross them is to disconnect. But to establish the boundaries is actually to connect more deeply into the lives of others. So therefore, in this small sharing with you, I invite you to establish our own sacred spaces, to respect the spaces of others, and eventually to try to experience God present in somebody else's space as God is present in our own space. Thank you very much.